The whole room fell silent. When a struggling single dad knelt down and spoke to the billionaire's deaf daughter in her own language, the Grand Harmon Hotel in Manhattan had seen a lot of impressive things over the years. Black tie galas, celebrity weddings, billion-dollar handshakes over crystal glasses of champagne. The kind of nights where powerful people reminded each other just how powerful they were, where every smile was calculated and every conversation was an investment. But nobody in that glittering ballroom on the night of the Harmon Foundation annual charity gala expected what was about to happen. And they certainly didn't expect it to come from a man in a gray shirt from Queens who almost didn't show up at all. His name was Caleb Monroe, 34 years old, a physical therapist at a mid-sized rehabilitation clinic in Astoria. He drove a 2016 Honda Civic with a cracked side mirror that he kept meaning to fix. He ate cereal for dinner more nights than he'd like to admit. He had a stack of unopened bills on his kitchen counter, a leaking bathroom pipe that had been leaking since October, and a 6-year-old son named Eli at home with Grandma, who had probably already negotiated an extra 30 minutes of screen time by now. He wasn't supposed to be here. His best friend Marcus, who worked in logistics for a company that partnered with the Harmon Foundation, had called him that afternoon, practically begging. His girlfriend had canceled last minute. He had an extra ticket. He needed a warm body who could hold a conversation and not embarrass him. Caleb had said no 3 times. Then Marcus had said the magic words, open bar and passed appetizers all night. He wore the only nice outfit he owned, a clean charcoal gray long sleeve, dark slacks he'd ironed twice because the crease kept coming out wrong, and a pair of dress shoes he'd shined with a paper towel and olive oil, because he couldn't find the actual shoe polish. No tea, no designer watch, no last name that meant anything to anyone in that room. He walked into that ballroom and felt it immediately. That particular Manhattan energy, where everyone is simultaneously performing and evaluating. He grabbed a sparkling water, found a quiet corner near a tall potted plant, and decided his mission for the evening was simple. Don't spill anything. Don't embarrass Marcus, go home by 10. That plan lasted exactly 47 minutes. The girl in the blue dress, it was the stillness that caught his eye first. In a room full of movement, servers weaving between guests, photographers flashing, couples swaying. Near the string quartet in the corner, there was one small point of absolute stillness. Near the tall window overlooking the Manhattan skyline stood a little girl. She was maybe 5 years old. She wore a royal blue velvet dress with a wide silk bow tied at the back, white tights, and tiny patent leather shoes that caught the light. When she shifted her weight, her golden curls were perfectly arranged. She was objectively one of the most beautifully dressed children Caleb had ever seen, the kind of dress that said someone loved her very much, and had thought carefully about this evening, and yet nobody was talking to her, not one person. Guests walked past her in a steady stream. Women in floor-length gowns, men in custom suits, people whose watches cost more than Caleb's annual salary, and not a single one stopped. Not a smile, not a wave, not a "Hey, what's your name, sweetheart?" that adults usually reflexively offer to small children at events like this. It was like she was invisible. A woman in a red dress nearly stepped on the girl's foot and didn't even look down. 2 men walked past mid-conversation, close enough that their suit jackets brushed her curls and neither noticed. A waiter in white gloves navigated around her with practiced efficiency, treating her as an obstacle rather than a person. The little girl wasn't crying. She wasn't tugging at anyone's sleeve, or looking around, desperately for a familiar face. She was just standing there with a quiet dignity that broke something open in Caleb's chest. Her small hands moved slightly near her waist, subtle, almost unconscious little shapes, like she was having a conversation with herself. Caleb watched her for a long moment, and then he recognized what her hands were doing. She's signing. He set down his sparkling water on the nearest table and started walking, what he knew, and how he knew it. 4 years earlier, Caleb's son Eli had gone through a 6-month evaluation and therapy program at the Queensbridge Community Speech and Language Center. The diagnosis wasn't serious, a moderate processing delay that responded beautifully to early intervention. But those months had changed. Caleb in ways he hadn't expected. He'd started volunteering at the center on weekends, partly because he wanted to give back, partly because Eli loved going and it felt wrong to drop him off and disappear. He'd met kids of all kinds there, kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome, kids who were deaf or hard of hearing, kids who communicated in ways that most of the world hadn't learned to understand yet. One of the lead therapists, Dr. Anita Webb, a tiny, relentless woman from Baltimore, who wore bright orange glasses and had zero patience for excuses, had pulled Caleb aside after his third weekend volunteering. "You keep trying to talk to the deaf kids and getting frustrated," she'd said, not unkindly. "You want to actually communicate with them or just feel bad that you can't?" He'd said he wanted to actually communicate. She'd handed him a workbook. "Come in Tuesday evenings. We do ASL basics. No charge, just show up." He'd shown up every Tuesday for 8 months. He'd practiced with Eli at home. He'd learned signs for animals and colors and feelings and questions. He'd made mistakes constantly and been corrected, cheerfully by 5-year-olds who were already more fluent than he'd ever be. He wasn't an interpreter. He wasn't even close to conversational fluency. But he knew enough. He knew enough to say hello, kneeling down. Caleb crossed the ballroom without a plan. He didn't rehearse anything. He didn't think about whether it was appropriate, or what the child's parents might think, or whether he, a random man in a gray shirt, had any business approaching a little girl at a black tie gala. He just went. He crouched down to her eye level, the way he'd learned to do with kids at the clinic, so they don't have to look up at you like you're a building, and raised his hands. "Hi, my name is Caleb. What's your name?" The little girl froze. For a full 3 seconds, she just stared at him. Big blue eyes, a tiny mouth slightly open, like she was processing something that didn't compute, like she'd pressed a button 100 times expecting nothing, and suddenly the door had opened. Then her whole face changed. It was the kind of transformation that happens in children and almost never in adults. Total, unguarded, instantaneous joy. A smile that started at her eyes before it reached her mouth, that took over her entire face. That made her look like she might actually levitate off the marble floor. Her hands flew up. "Lily," she signed. Then with slightly older hands than Caleb expected, more practiced. "You know sign language? For real?" "A little," he signed back honestly, finger spelling the words he wasn't sure of. "I'm still learning, but I wanted to say hello. You were standing alone and I thought you might want someone to talk to." Lily considered this seriously, the way small children consider things when they're actually thinking and not performing thought. "Everyone always just walks past me," she signed. "They don't know how to talk to me, so they just don't." Something in Caleb's chest did a slow, heavy turn. "Well," he signed, "I'm not great at this, so you might have to correct me a lot. Is that okay?" She nodded so hard her curls bounced. "That's a really beautiful dress, by the way," he signed. Lily looked down at herself, smoothed the velvet with both hands, and signed with enormous pride. "My daddy picked it. He always picks the best ones." "Your daddy has great taste," Caleb signed. She laughed. Not a sound exactly, but a breath and a brightness. An expression so full of delight that 2 passing guests actually slowed down to look, confused by what they were seeing. The room goes quiet. They talked for what felt like 5 minutes, but was probably closer to 20. Lily told him, in signs and finger spelling and the occasional sound she made without seeming to notice, that her favorite color was blue, obviously. She signed, gesturing at her dress, that she had a dog named Captain, who was this big, arms spread as wide as they could go, that her dad was the one in the picture on the big banner across the room, and that she thought the shrimp cocktail at this party was so good, but the sauce is wrong. Caleb told her about Eli, about Captain America, who was Eli's favorite, about the leaking pipe in the bathroom that made a sound like a sad bird at night. Lily found the sad bird pipe absolutely hilarious. He was halfway through fingerspelling, plumber, badly, when he became aware of the silence, not complete silence. The string quartet was still playing softly in the corner, but the ambient roar of 200 conversations had dropped to something much quieter, much stiller. He looked up slowly. The ballroom was watching them. Not rudely, not the staring you do at an accident or a spectacle, more like the stillness that falls over people when they witness something they didn't expect to feel anything about, and find themselves feeling everything about it anyway. Glasses had been lowered mid-sip. Conversations had trailed off. A photographer had instinctively raised his camera, then thought better of it and lowered it again. A man in a charcoal suit was standing about 10 feet away, completely still. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of face that had learned composure, the way you learn a language, through long practice, through necessity, through years of needing to be the most controlled person in every room. But right now, Richard Harmon, founder of Harmon Technologies, philanthropist, one of the 20 wealthiest men in America, was not composed. His jaw was tight. His eyes were wet. He was watching his daughter laugh, freely and joyfully and without any of the careful guardedness she developed over 5 years of being in rooms where no one spoke her language, and he looked like a man watching something he had almost stopped hoping to see. Lily spotted him. Her face shifted, still happy but different. The particular happiness of seeing your person. She signed rapidly, pointing at Caleb. "Daddy?"
This is Caleb.
He knows sign language. He talked to me. He talked to me the whole time. Richard Harmon walked forward slowly. Caleb stood up, suddenly very aware of his olive oil shined, shoes and his non-designer watch, and the fact that he'd just spent 20 minutes on the floor of a billionaire's gala, talking to his daughter without asking anyone's permission. "She says you know sign language," Richard said. His voice was quiet, carefully quiet. "Basic ASL," Caleb said. "I learned it volunteering at a therapy center in Queens. I saw her standing alone and I didn't think about it. I just went over." Richard looked at him for a long moment. "How long has she been standing there?" he asked. "I noticed her about 45 minutes after I arrived," Caleb said honestly. "She was alone when I saw her." Something crossed Richard Harmon's face that Caleb couldn't fully name. Not anger, or not only anger, grief maybe. The particular grief of a parent who has worked so hard to give a child everything and still can't give them the one thing that costs nothing. Someone willing to just show up. He extended his hand. "Richard Harmon. Caleb Monroe." They shook. "Mr. Monroe," Richard said. "In 2 hours at this event with 200 guests, you are the first person who has spoken to my daughter." The words landed in the quiet of the room. Nobody moved. Everything that changed. The rest of the gala was different. Lily refused to leave Caleb's side. She introduced him, through signs, which he struggled to keep up with, and which made her enormously pleased with herself, to waiters, to a woman who turned out to be a senator, to Marcus, who was completely baffled, to the string quartet violinist during a break. Richard Harmon stayed close, not hovering, just present, watching his daughter move through the room like she owned it. Because for the first time that evening she did. At one point near the end of the night, Richard pulled Caleb aside. "I want to ask you something," he said. "And I want you to be honest with me." "Okay," Caleb said. "When you walked over to her, you didn't know who she was. You didn't know who her father was." "No," Caleb said. "I just saw a little kid standing alone." Richard nodded slowly. "And that was enough." "She's a kid," Caleb said simply. Of course it was enough. What came after? 3 weeks after the gala, Caleb received a phone call from the director of the Harmon Foundation's Community Programs Division. Richard Harmon had authorized a $2.3 million grant to expand ASL, education and deaf accessibility resources across underfunded community therapy centers in New York City, starting with the Queensbridge Community Speech and Language Center in Queens. The grant would fund interpreter training, accessible technology, family ASL workshops, and paid positions for deaf educators. Dr. Anita Webb, when Caleb called to tell her, was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "You showed up on a Tuesday. You just kept showing up." Richard Harmon also quietly enrolled his entire executive team. All 47 members in a 12-week ASL certification program, mandatory, no exceptions, starting the following Monday.
"And Lily?"
Lily asked her father if Caleb and Eli could come to her birthday party. If Eli liked dogs because Captain was very friendly. If maybe, just maybe, they could be friends. Richard had told her yes, absolutely, without question, yes. What that ballroom learned. That night, 200 of Manhattan's most powerful people stood in one of the city's most expensive rooms and were reminded of something they had quietly forgotten, that the most profound thing you can offer another person, child or adult, billionaire's daughter or nobody from Queens, is simply the willingness to see them, to cross the room, to learn even a little of their language, to crouch down to their level and say hello. Caleb Monroe didn't walk into that ballroom with connections or credentials, or a plan to change anything. He walked in as a tired single dad in olive oil shined shoes who almost said no. He left as the only person in that room who had truly, fully actually talked to someone. And in the end, in every room, at every level of power and privilege, that is the rarest and most valuable thing of all. You don't need wealth to change someone's world. You just need to notice them when everyone else has decided not to.